So, who was the snitch? Who snitched Anne Frank and her family out? Anne Frank, who had been hiding in the secret annex for years. Who is the snitch? Who is the goddamn snitch? It was Arnold, this guy. Arnold. Arnold. Hold on, it's Vandenberg. Arnold Vandenberg. So Arnold Vandenberg, you know what he did? He didn't give a shit. He didn't give a shit about Anne Frank or anybody else, for that matter. He just wanted to save his own hide. Well, he did want to save his own family. So apparently this Arnold Vandenberg had wanted to save his own family, and he had a secret list. He had a list of secret hiding places. Apparently no names and no guarantees that in these hiding places there would be Jewish people. But he gave that list up to the Nazis in order to save his own skin, his own family. Maybe they were just, taking the screws to him. Who knows? Because he was a well-known Jewish notary. And he also helped the Nazis. He sold artwork to, I want to say, Hermann Göring. So what does all this mean? Not much, but it adds another layer to the, what happened to Anne Frank. Anne Frank is going to get killed in a concentration camp. So who are the fucking Nazis that actually arrested her? And then who are the, Nazis at the concentration camp that had denied her this and that? And she had syphilis. So how in the hell did she catch syphilis at the concentration camp? What the hell? And she's going to die. Americans are going to show up 2 months later. So, for years, the Franks were able to successfully hide out. Only Otto Frank is going to live. So this guy, he sold the fuck out of the Frank family. The whole Frank family is going to get killed, except for Otto. And then the diary is just found on the floor later on, and they had to piece it together. So the fact that we even were able to get the diary, but it was Winston Churchill's radio address that said, we're going to need to know what the hell happened in Nazi Germany. So if you're listening, go ahead and take some notes. And Anne Frank, took some notes. So this is, not the worst of the worst. A snitch. The whole thing about, do you tell on a person or you don't tell on a person? If a person's being a shithead, you got to do something about it. So, I think it's okay to report, major crimes. In fact, I think as a citizen, you kind of have a duty to report it. You saw the thing and you didn't say nothing, but a lot of the times you don't want to, call the police for any reason whatsoever. And he was, doing it to save his family. And so people are, I just read a quote that said something about, we don't want to turn this into the Jews did it to themselves. Who killed Anne Frank? It was the Jews that did it. He was a Jewish notary. And so it just, I don't think that this just adds a layer to the thing. Yeah, the snitch to the, Nazis, the person that snitched to the Nazis is held somewhat responsible, somewhat culpable for what the hell happened to Anne Frank. Everybody's responsible for Anne Frank in some respects, right? This fucking bullshit has happened. These atrocities are happening. It's well known. And, for years they endured. Ultimately, it wasn't the Jewish notary that, killed Anne Frank. It was the Nazis, the ones that arrested her, the ones at the concentration camp that, made her whatever, sew sweaters together and whatever the hell they did at the, Bergh-Belsen, at the Bergh-Belsen concentration camp. So she was, died at 15. She's going to be young forever. And that's, her diary is important for historical reasons. So Arnold Vandenberg, what the hell did you do, man? Fucking snitch motherfucker. It is, it's unfortunate that the Nazis were able to get some Jewish folks to turn on other Jewish folks to save their own families, to save their own skin. I'm sure he didn't happily sell artwork to Hermann Goring. I'm sure he didn't happily, I don't think, I would hate to think that he happily turned in the Frank family. And it was an listed, unguaranteed list of addresses. So, maybe he thought they had not been there. Maybe he thought they had got the, hell out of Dodge. But Arnold Vandenberg was a well-known notary, one of the 6 Jewish notaries in Amsterdam. Amsterdam at the time, a notary in the Netherlands is like a high-profile lawyer. So this motherfucker's big, Mr. Big Time. As a notary, he was respected. He was working with the committee to help Jewish refugees. And before the war, as they were fleeing Germany, the anonymous note did not identify Otto Frank. It said your address was betrayed. So, in fact, what had happened was, and it was an unsigned note. So somebody found a piece of paper that had some shit that's okay. The note didn't identify Otto Frank. It didn't say, Dear Otto Frank. It just said your address was betrayed. So, in fact, what had happened was Arnold Vandenberg was able to get a number of addresses of Jews in hiding, and it was those addresses with no names attached and no guarantee that the Jews were still in hiding. Were still hiding at those addresses. That's what he gave over to save his skin, if you want, but to save himself and his family personally. I think he's a tragic figure. So that's Sullivan. In fact, there's actually like 32 names. They dwindled it down to 4 names. And then they said out of those 4 names, he's the most likely suspect. So Peter Van Twisk said, 4 out of initial 32 names remained. So there's, 3 other suspects. If you're like a big, Arnold, what's his name? Vandenberg. If you're a big Arnold Vandenberg supporter, like, hey, man, notaries, right? He's just good at organization, right? This Vandenberg, he was good at organization and shit. And yeah, just so easy just to point your finger at, this poor guy who's just trying to do his, notary work. He's just a good notary, right? He knows how to sign his signatures. He knows how to put a stamp on nice officials. He knows how to have a witness to sign any, legal document. He's just a notary, just a badass, one of the main 6 notaries in Amsterdam. And that's apparently in Amsterdam, that's, you're like a movie star if you're a notary there. So the note had said that Arnold Vandenberg had access to addresses where Jews were hiding as a member of Amsterdam's wartime Jewish council, and he passed the list of those addresses to the Nazis to save his own family. So that could have included the Frank address, or it could have been one of the other 3, out of the 32 names. I think publish the fucking names, tell us the 4, and let the public figure it out. Because now this poor, Arnold Vandenberg is going to get scapegoated yet once again. And ultimately, this doesn't solve the crime of who killed Anne Frank. I want to know the person that, pulled the so-called lever, who actually pulled the so-called trigger. What, who was the arresting officers? What were the names of those Nazis, those arresting officers? And then who was running the Belgian prison concentration camp? And did they specifically, that she was already dead when they, arrived? So when did she get killed? And who were the people, who were the executioners? Were there just like 3 people, at the thing, and they were just, just shooting one after another? The war is over and you don't need the slave labor anymore, so just start executing one after another. Who's the one that pulled the trigger? And then some of the higher ups, who's the ones that gave the order? But who pulled the trigger? Who actually murdered Anne Frank? It wasn't the Jewish person, because that's what Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate's hands were tied. Pontius Pilate's hands are tied. He said, hey Jews, what do you think I should do with Jesus? And it was the Jews' fault, right? So such an easy scapegoat. So yeah, let's not scapegoat, poor Arnold Vandenberg. Some crimes need to be reported. If you have no other options, you got to use the tools that's available to you. And yeah, so if you lived in a good society with good government, good laws, and good cops, and why wouldn't you report a crime? Why wouldn't you report a crime? So a violent crime, right? A crime where there's an actual victim, not hey, there's some Jewish people living in that house over there. That's some bullshit, right? That's where snitching comes from, is the war on drugs. And so people are just what? They're smoking weed and you fucking, snitch. That is some bullshit. You snitched on somebody for some fucking weed. It's like, get a goddamn life. Even the other, harder drugs, he was just in his house being a fucking pathetic loser doing a bunch of goddamn cocaine and shit. Uh, you're not saving society. Why don't you go after the goddamn, there's murderers all over the place. At least a dozen or two murders in Colorado and New Mexico. So far this year, only it's the 17th. Yeah, there's millions of people, but how many murders do you think is an okay amount of murders in, say, a population of 10 million? Well, 100 in a month. Is that too many? If you have 100 murders in a month? I mean, it's 10 million, but it's murder, right? So 101 months? That's fucking nuts. That's crazy. Because they were saying it's like 100 every year, which that sounds outrageous to me. But so apparently, Otto Frank, he found some old post-war investigation dossier which named Arnold Vanden Bergh, said he passed on information. So it seemed that Otto Frank had known about this guy, but he didn't go public with it for whatever reason. He was aware of the note, but didn't go public with it. Did he know it was him? Did he assume it probably was him and didn't want to? Or is it much ado about nothing? What'd you find? Well, I found this old note. Was it forged? Could be, probably. And that means Arnold Vanden Bergh is the one who snitched on the Franks. Based on the forged note, yep. With the carbon dating and we looked with the microscope. The media's going with it. I mean, CNN.com is where. Fake news? No. Anne Frank was real. The Holocaust happened. Nazis are fucking terrible. And yeah, go fuck yourself, you fucking Nazi motherfuckers. You Nazi motherfuckers.